Hey there, and welcome to Thinking to Win, where you jumpstart your journey into improving your game. I'm happy that you felt like you're ready to take the next step in improving your gaming competitiveness. My name is Simon Gojkovic, and this is the online version of the competitive 40k training that I developed and have been delivering to students here in Brisbane and around Australia. The training covers both theory and practical components, broken up into different sections, and generally follows the different stages of an event. This allows you to work your way through the training, doing as much or as little homework as you want. Because it's a video, you can pause, rewind, do different things over and over. The practical components you can test with different types of lists, different types of layouts, different types of terrain, that type of thing. I've also included timestamps in the description to different sections that we'll be covering, and this can be kind of used as a table of contents and for future reference. As I said, you can kind of skip through things. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions of things to cover in the future, please let me know in the comments below. I'll definitely be keeping track of that type of stuff, and where I go in the future with more training like this or different types of training really will be up to you, to the feedback I get from people. I encourage all of you to reply to each other, as no one person has all the answers. So if you found this valuable and you've got your own ideas, contribute. Everyone should, there is no one person that is the best and has all the answers. We all kind of help each other in the community, and really, you know, I had people helping me out, and I've been helping people for pretty much the last 5 years, and that type of assistance and idea bouncing is really what takes you to that next level. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing today is really the foundational stuff, and it's about time management and creating space for thinking. So what we'll do, so that's kind of the intro bit. We'll jump straight into the theory component of the training, and I'll be using a little bit of a crib sheet. So kind of this here, this is the training that I actually deliver. So forgive me if I look down a little bit. I just want to make sure that I kind of cover all the things that's important for you guys. All right, so the theory bit. So we're going to get deep for just a little bit here. 40k can be a very in-depth and complex game, and honestly, my belief, and this is what is the underpinning of this entire training course, is that 40k rewards the players that can think. Now, this is not meant to be a dispersion on anybody or, you know, insulting anybody. All it means is that when you get the time, the space, and have kind of the mindset that it allows you to kind of stop and think at crucial portions of the game, and really try to understand and think about what you need to do to win the game, you will be rewarded more so than someone who is feeling rushed, is getting tilted because something's not going right, or dice aren't working, or you haven't really thought about the meta or your list enough prior to the event, or, you know, you get caught out by rules or things like that. So really, this whole course, and so this particular course, will be focused on that, increasing the amount of time and space that you can get in thinking will be, in essence, directly correlated to how well you'll play and how well you'll do. This is my belief. This is what my, not just my belief, this is what my experience has been over the years, and what got me from, you can see the videos on my channel, where from we'll say an average player, or even below average, when I restarted in competitiveness about 5-6 years ago, to just this last year, you know, captain of the Queensland team, captain of the Australian team at the ETC, and winning quite a number of tournaments in the last, you know, 12 to 24 months. So to this end, that's what this training is going to be focused on. If I do any other training, it'll be on different topics. But for today, we're going to be really focused on what, you know, giving you more space to think, time to think, all that type of stuff, but just thinking. And going over different strategies and tactics, and then mapping those on the different stages of an event. So we've got the before an event, before a game, during a game, after a game, and after an event. They're kind of the main stages of any event and any particular game that has specific things that you can do to give you space to think. So, as I was just saying, we've got different stages and some examples of strategies, and just go through my list here that we'll be kind of covering is the practice, repetition, and muscle memory, memorizing and understanding rules and interactions, gameplay speed, transparency of lists and actions, minimizing actions that can cause bad blood, being personable and developing rapport, limiting rules into inquiries and arguments, and reducing the chance you become on tilt. And all of these strategies are grouped into three main themes, which is intention, transparency, and time. So all of this is about giving you more space, more time to think. So quick explanation of these themes. So we've got intention. So intention is about kind of stating to your opponent what you're about to do, what you are intending to do, just before you do it. That's the simplified version of it. Lots of examples of that, and all the different stages you can do it. So, for example, in your lists, and when you give a person a list and what's listed on your list, that you can do things to show your intention. In the actual game, or just before the game, sorry, when you're kind of explaining things, and in an actual game itself, you can, before you touch anything, measuring from one point to another and saying, I'm 26 inches away from you, so I need a X amount to charge, etc., etc. It's all about limiting disagreement, getting their okay, in essence, before you do something. This not only speeds up your own gameplay, it limits arguments, it keeps the person comfortable with the game, because again, there is in essence a social contract when you play 40k or any of these type of games, where you're there to have fun, they're there to have fun, and while inevitably there's going to be some sort of winner in most cases, there's no reason to be a jerk about it. Transparency. Now, transparency is the cousin of intention, and it's focused on really not playing gotcha games, and especially gotcha 40k. Mainly manifested at the start of the game, where in lists and you being transparent about what units are with who, using say little rubber bands or anything like that. What units can do what. One of my pet peeves about transparency is when you've got millions of orc boys, for example, but you don't exactly know what unit is, what the different units are, if you understand what I mean. Where they might not have painted bases, or they might not have anything special about them. They might have a little color, little line on their base, and so trying to keep track of, okay, so that unit, oh god, and it's not very transparent. It makes your opponent just really feel uneasy. Again, it's making sure that your opponent feels comfortable in what you're going to do. Doesn't matter if you're going to win or if you lose. It's being comfortable during that, kind of through that journey, if you understand. Time. Anything that prevents you from playing full game in the allotted time. So we'll talk about in that section, but really speeding up your game, using chess clocks, reducing arguments, not thinking too hard about, once you kind of got the game plan, you spend 2 minutes thinking at the start of a turn, but then just going and doing the movements, not moving one thing, then thinking a little bit, and then doing this and that. Yeah, it's intention, transparency, and time. 3 key themes about giving you more space to think, about giving you more time to think, and lots of examples we're going to go through throughout these stages of an event. All right, so got any questions about the theory? Throw them down the bottom. Other than that, we'll jump straight into section 1. The first stage of an event. So this is before an event. Now, this is where most people spend most of their time. Of course, you've got, I don't know, I'm an extreme example where I've gone to probably 15, 20 tournaments in the last 12 months. So, more than one a month. Whereas the majority of people would, I reckon, would probably do between 1 and 5 in a year, something like that. And so the majority of your thinking in 40K kind of happens in this portion of it. The majority of coverage, you've got blogs, you've got the books themselves, you've got blogs, you've got creating lists, thinking about meta, discussing it, all that stuff. That's all of the before the event. And the more effort and smart effort as well. It's not just, I read the GW website every day, something like that. And so therefore I know everything about what the meta is at my local big tournament. Something like that. It doesn't work like that. You have to do smart thinking leading up to an event. And really that's what we're going to be talking about for this stage. So we've got, and I won't go into too much detail about exactly what you should and shouldn't be looking at. I'll list below the resources that I use personally, so the blogs and things like that that I check out. I don't check these out every day. There's some I check maybe daily, others I'll check once in a blue moon, but I found these valuable. So of course, 40K sites, blogs, podcasts, that type of thing. They don't hurt. Let's put it that way. Very rarely have I read something and didn't find at least a little bit of use, or even just neutral. Like I rarely find something that I've read about 40K and I actually go backwards in my game. So anything that you really enjoy, someone's style of writing, someone's, how they think, or if you see YouTube videos or whatever, go for it. It's never going to hurt, in my experience. I'm sure one of you guys will find that one example where someone's just playing everything wrong, and yeah. Read your rulebook. Read your codex, and then read your FAQs. So that's the kind of the beginner. So I'll break up some of these things where I'll say that this is for a little bit more advanced players. So if you're a beginner at this is the first thing that you should do. Read your rulebook, your codex, and your FAQ. As you get more and more experience with that, move on to other factions and do some of the key factions, say Imperial ones like Imperial Guard, Space Marines, all that type of stuff, and then you start moving a little bit into, say, Eldars and Chaoses. And then as you get more and more experienced and more knowledgeable through playtesting or whatever, do things like Necrons, or Orcs are a good one where very few people play it, but it's a very, very strong book. So get access to them, borrow them from friends, if you've got the money, buy them from GW, and really go through them and not only look at them, but write some lists. Think about them if you were playing them. What are the tricks that you think you could do? Another thing I would even recommend for the really advanced, and I've done this a number of times, just proxy, just use your own models and say, this is a Necron Patreon, whatever, one of the little jump pack dudes or the sword and board guys. This is a Necron list I've created. You're using using Space Marine models as them. Get a friend and play the game, and just see if the kind of crazy combinations that you've come up with actually works. And you only have to do this a couple of times, and then you get a pretty good feeling of how Necrons work. And so this is definitely right down, on the advanced spectrum, where you've got from beginners, really it's just trying to remember your own rules. The basic rules, your own rules, and what the mission is. Right? They're the key things that you need to think about. And then as you get down, it's there's lots of strategies about how you can improve not being, not misunderstanding rules, not getting caught out by not understanding how an entire race or faction works, things like that. I won't go too much detail. There's plenty of resources out there about this exact topic. But if you guys really want to, this might be a future training where we do something like that. All right, so as I said, look at the lists for the 40k sites and blogs. I use quite a few of them. There's also a few other sites out there which, like I think Battlescribe is a good one, where if you really wanted to see what the rules of, and you don't rules of a particular unit or data slate, and you don't have access to the book, you can go into that. There's a few other places that you can go, of course. Again, before an event, read the players pack. Sometimes I get caught on this because I travel around Australia and internationally as well, and there are variations between each TO and where you're playing. There's three kind of main formats. You've got ETC style missions, right? So they're like the triple missions where you've got Eternal War, Maelstrom, and Kill Points. And I call them ETC style missions because they're normal rulebook missions, but all smudged together. 3 different missions smudged together. Then we've got the ITC champ missions, or just ITC in general, and a lot of you guys would know exactly what those are. There's the 6 missions, and knowing kind of which of those two, if it's one of those 2 missions, is really important because it does impact the meta, but also impacts your list development. Then you've also got, and this is less common, but I have played in a number of tournaments where they're just single rulebook missions in essence. So these are general GW ones, some of the smaller RTTs that I've been to, where they'll go, this is Maelstrom only, or Eternal War for 3 missions, Maelstrom only for 2 missions, but that's it. It's just a single mission. They're very, very swingy, those. Like I played in a Maelstrom only tournament with, I thought, a very strong list, but I came very close to losing a number of games just because I hadn't really considered that this list, which is really strong in both ITC and ETC, is not really that good in just Maelstrom. It was touch and go in a couple of those games. So think about what favors. So you're going to kind of going on to the next point. We've got thinking about what types of lists a players pack favors. All right. So something that I used extensively was Taluses. So Dark Elder, they have Taluses. I'm sure you all know what Taluses are. Now, in the ETC style players pack, Talus is great. In my opinion, I think they're a very, very strong unit. But in ITC, where they've changed it now, to give up Big Game Hunter, I found that they were giving up too many secondaries, and their kind of relative value actually dropped. And so, and I'm just doing a little example here, but you get the idea where your list, even if you have a really good list, and you're smashing people left, right, and center, certain missions and certain players packs will always influence how good that particular list is. And so you just really need to think about that. So like MSU, if you've got lots of, so MSU is multiple small units. If you've got lots and lots of little units, and an ITC style event, that can hurt you. Especially if they're really easy to kill. Like if you've got multiple small units, but they're all characters hiding behind really hard to kill vehicles or something like that, then we've got something different. But yeah, if you've got because if they can kill 2 or 3 units per turn, that's a thing like Butcher's Bill, secondary, and then they're always going to kill more, as an example. And so, whereas in ETC style missions, that's not necessarily a problem. Especially if it's capped, say, at 6 kill points differential, and we can go into that in a little bit later. But really, you just need to really think about what does this player's pack, how does it, what list does it benefit? What lists are stronger in this type of player's pack versus other mission types or missions in general, deployment types, all that type of stuff. These are all things that you need to consider in the lead up to an event. Alright, so who's coming to an event? Now, this is a bit more relevant for smaller events, and a great example was, I think Nick Novati, one of the players up in the northeast of America, where they went to a small event, but pretty much most of the top players in that region were going to this event. And that is going to be complete, and it might only be like a 20-man tournament. But that kind of meta and the kind of skill level of that event is going to be completely different to another, say, 20-player tournament at your local, say, GW. Not putting people down there, but you get the idea. It's just, if you know the almost like the caliber of players that are going to be attending, or kind of what the event's pitched as, it should influence what you take, to kind of how seriously you take to prep, the mindset, that type of thing. Also, archetypes of armies. So different regions, especially in Australia, you've got different regions play Horde more aggressively, or more consistently than other regions. And so if you're traveling interstate, for example, and you happen to know that one particular state does a lot of hordes or a lot of demons or something like that, or plays lots and lots of knights, then you need to take that into consideration when you're kind of developing your list and thinking about what type of archetype you're looking to develop. All right. Writing a list. Now, for some people, including myself, this is the best or funnest little bit about 40k, because it's kind of like a little mini game. This is like a problem-solving challenge within the game itself. To me, I find it the most mentally stimulating and almost rewarding when things just start lining up, and you're working on a problem, and then all of a sudden things in play testing that were not going well, you kind of dropped them, you switched it, and then everything's kind of lining up and you're going, yes, this is it, this is the list. Alright, so what I like to do, and we'll do this in a second to the actual activity, but you think about what type of player are you? Now, most people are stronger in one particular style of play, and people can go in between, but I'll give me as the example. So I feel that I play strongest in aggressive style lists, whereas there is others who are much stronger in a defensive style list, and they're the two main archetype of lists. And then from that, there's kind of like sub-archetypes. Again, there's a bunch of people, I'll name drop again, Nick Novati, he did a great post about, he kind of splits those into four groups. But there's a number of other players and people who have posted about these kind of overarching play styles of a player, not just another archetype of an army, but of a player itself. Now, I like just splitting it offensive, defensive, and then when you go offensive, are you, kind of board control offensive, or are you, offensive in just diving certain things? You can be offensive in different ways. You can be offensive through shooting, not just through melee. Whereas defensive is, again, you can be defensive through board control, through just being really hard to kill, that type of stuff. Anyway, think about you as a player. Where do you find the most success? Where do you find the most fun? Do you find more fun through being an offensive player or a defensive player? All right, we'll just talk about those two main archetypes. do you like horde playstyle? Do you like elite playstyle? Do you like lots of crazy random things happening? Do you like, you really just think about what you like, what you enjoy. Now this is something I was saying to the Queensland team when we were discussing lists and things like that. I like people to come up and be kind of true to themselves about what type of player they are and what they enjoy. Because if they're true to themselves when they're creating that list, they're going to be more invested in making sure that that list works. And when they get to a point where they're kind of stuck, so they're stuck, things aren't working, if they're invested, if they have ownership of that list, and if it kind of lines up with how they're playing, but they're just trying to solve a way of fixing something, they're going to be giving more to fixing that problem. They're going to be practicing more. They're going to be working on it hard. They're going to be thinking about this when they're sleeping, when they're brushing their teeth, they're having a shower, whatever. Person who just gets given a list and said, here you go, this is a good list, go play it. And it doesn't match their play style, and it's a horde list and they hate playing horde, it might be a great list. It's not for them. And so when it's not working, they're not going to spend the extra effort to make it work. They're not going to try and fix it. And if you're kind of working up to one particular event that's really important, it's not the right way to go about doing it. Alright, so that's the first stuff that you got to think about. Like that's the foundational stuff. And now, as an activity for you guys, so normally in a one-on-one training, this is where we would actually kind of go through these steps, and I ask questions and give some ideas and things like that. But for you, think about, you can hit pause or at the end of this session, think about the armies that you've played. What have you enjoyed? Where have you found success? The horde question, the elite question, the shooty question, the melee question. Do you like shooting things a little bit more than melee, or do you find the melee phase really fun and intricate and making sure you get that surround the model and can't make them fall back and all that type of stuff? Does that entice you, or do you just like seeing someone try and charge your tower gun line and blowing them off the table? Like, be true to yourself. So think about who you are. Then, once you've done that foundation stuff, think about a theme of what you're trying to achieve. And this is pretty much how lists get developed, and lists get that little spark. So, if you like shooty things, and you're an offensive player, there's thousands of lists that you can do. You can do, fast bike lists. You can do like lots of Tau Fire Warriors, but in Devilfishes and pushing up the board. Multiple lists. And I can't give you the answers to all this, because because I don't know who you are. You need to think about it yourself, who you are as a player. What style of player are you going to put that extra effort into? And then pick a theme. And then that theme, from that theme, you can pick a faction. But I wouldn't pick the faction first over the theme. I'd pick a theme in general, and then especially if you get a theme and you're okay with playing in Imperium, for example, in the Imperium world, then you can go crazy in that. Whereas if you say, I want a super melee list, right? You really like the melee phase and you want to be super aggressive, and then you pick a faction over a theme, and you pick the faction Tau, it's going to be very, very difficult. Alright. And in a second you can pause and kind of do your do this kind of list development yourself. But I have some just general list building rules. And this is something that I try to, through experience, include in every one of my lists. So these rules, so for myself, it's out of line of sight shooting. So, or fast melee. But really it's getting those units that are hiding. You know, say there's like a one-man unit left. So a unit, you've killed him down to one model, and now he's hiding behind the building. This is even worse for, you know, in ITC, but how are you going to kill that one-man model or one-man unit? You shoot them out of line of sight, or you punch him. You run up and punch him. So every one of my lists has one of those two components. Either fast melee that can grab those, you know, really damaged hurt units, or the out of line of sight shooting. The second one is some sort of long range shooting. Some sort. Just to force the issue, and this is one of the things where I try not to play, you know, only melee or only shooting lists, because I don't like giving up on whole phases of the game. But I really find it important to have some sort of long range shooting, just to force the issue, so the person can't just sit back and say, all right, well, I've won this game and I just need to delay you because you have no shooting and I can just shoot you all day. Or conversely, a melee army that can just sit on objectives and not push forward towards you because you have no guns. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of those, and I haven't found them to be that useful. So just some, and when I say long range, 36 inches. So 30 to 36 inches is kind of the minimum. 48 even better, and then if you've got longer than that, great. And then the last kind of rule that I use in any type of list that I build is some sort of sniper ability. Now this is a new one. I didn't have this in my list, in my rule set, we'll say a couple of months ago, but it's something I've introduced just because of where the 8th ed meta is shifting. Now it's not, you don't need to take a million snipers, but just 3 to 4. 3 to 4 is the minimum. Maybe even 1, but some sort of sniper ability. It doesn't have to be snipers. It can be, so Zench and a lot of the Elder Psychers have this ability, you know, where you can snipe out characters with spells. You can, just a Solitaire, for example, that's a sniper ability. Getting a Solitaire, diving it into a character and just nuking that character, or multiple characters. So some sort of sniper ability. It doesn't have to be a sniper. So Eric, as you know, he's one of our one of the teammates of Godhammer. His rules, again, long range shots is a consistent one. He's a more defensive style player. So another rule that he puts into pretty much all of his lists, especially the ones that he really enjoys, is being able to take a hit and then punch back. So most of his lists are defensive, and the key to a defensive style list is you have to be able to get hit. There are lots of really aggressive offensive style lists, and as a defensive list you have to be able to take that hit, you take losses, but you're in a better position then to hit back, and you have to have that unit or your army to be able to do that. You can't just take the hit and then not do anything about that. And then this is a rule that he has, is there's no clear targets in his army. He tries to limit, you know, the one big thing that you really want to kill. Especially if it's targetable. Like if there's one big thing, but it's completely out of line of sight. So for example, a large unit of Hive Guard, that's okay. He's run large units of Hive Guard, but he hides them and makes them hard to deal with. But generally he'll spread the targets out across his army, and it really makes it challenging to pick out the right target. And the right target at the turn 1 might switch to turn 3. And it's really interesting type of list building when you're kind of spreading threats throughout an army and not just having that one key thing. For example, not having one big Castellan or something like that. All right, So hit pause, rewind back to the list building beginning, and create your list. Alright, so now that you've got your list, the next thing that you can do is just practice. Just lots and lots of practice, right? Lots of reps, doing it smartly as well. Again, lots of articles and things online about this, but smart ways of doing it is playing, just say, the first turn. Deploy, play the first turn. Sometimes even just deployment. Objective placement, deployment, and then talking about how the game would probably go. And just getting games after games after games. Playing, the end game is important, but it's nowhere near as important as the beginning. The very start of the game, even before a single dice is rolled, that's where most of, if you've won or lost the game, is going to happen. So in your practice, again, another smart way of doing it is not just playing lots of games and not just playing against the same person over and over, but playing different players of different styles, so defensive style players, offensive style players, and also playing different style armies, so different factions, but also a defensive, say, orc army, and then an offensive style orc army, in a horde orc versus an elite orc, or something like that. Just and as you build your kind of repertoire of what you understand, this is what gives you that time. So when you rock up to a table and you go, cool, what's your list? And you look at it and you go, cool, I've played that, or you have an idea of what that that game's going to look like, and so you can then plan accordingly. And then the most important, we'll call it the most important 5 minutes of any type of thinking, is that just before you pick sides or you start deploying your objectives, you need that 5 minutes to really just think about, and that's where all of this work, all the stuff that we're doing right now, is giving you that foundation. So when you are just before, and we'll get to that in a second, but just before you start that game, you're spending 5 minutes of super intense thinking. All right, write up cheat sheets. So again, foundation stuff. This is all the foundation stuff. You want to be able to also do stuff beforehand to give you space before the game and during the game to think. And I'm going to show you a bunch of examples here of cheat sheets that I do. So write up cheat sheets, create tokens, all the things that you don't, just so you don't have to remember. Like while you're playing the game, you don't want to have to remember, what spells this one got, what buff did I give this guy, did that cast, oh crap, did I, you don't have to think about this type of stuff. So, one of the things I like doing, and just see if you can see that. There we go. So this is a cheat sheet of Eldari, so all the different stratagems, warlord traits, etc., that you can take. How much CP? So here's another one that I use, and I'll mark it out. I'll circle. This one's important. And this is my prep. This is the prep I do before an event. And I'll say there's 50 stratagems that I could take, but these 10 are the ones that I'm more than likely to use, and these 4 are the ones I'm almost guaranteed to use. And so for those 4 stratagems, right, that I'm almost always going to use, I'll then create tokens. I'll create a little, and I've got some examples here. So we've got little tokens. Hopefully you can see that. Ooh, there we go. So little tokens I'll put, say, right in front of me, just so I cannot forget it. And when I cast it or do the stratagem, whatever, I'll throw it behind the unit to make sure that me and my opponent knows that this has been done. I'll announce it, I'll put the token down or the little piece of paper or whatever you want to do behind the unit, and then I will, spend the CP, or say, this guy is casting this spell. He casts it, Fortune, cool. I'll then put a little token behind that particular unit to say he's got fortune. Things like that. This links with transparency. This links with time. This links with intention. This helps speed up your game. Make sure that your opponent doesn't accuse you of, you didn't cast that, what are you talking about? Because I have played so many bloody games where, especially, and elder players are terrible for this, and some of the chaos players are not better, but they will get, say, 1 unit of Shining Spears, and they'll cast 14 bloody spells on this thing. Some will pass, some won't, and then when you come to actually hurting this thing, you'll go, right, so take me through it again, what does this unit have? What's its stats? And then they go to remember and this, and this, and then they'll get to your turn and they'll go, oh, yeah, no, I forgot this, or they didn't have this, or, they said, oh, yeah, no, they have fortune. It's like, no, I didn't think fortune went off. And then you get into arguments, and then you get to, it's just a schmozzle. Don't do that. If you want to be a better, more competitive player, you need to improve your intention, your transparency, and your time management. And that's, we're going to keep on going. I'm going to keep on repeating it pretty much every half an hour to an hour. I'm going to say those same bloody words, because it's just so important as a base foundational thing for you as a player. We're not doing, advanced skills and, trapping and all that stuff. There's stuff on the web that tell you these little tactics things. We're not focusing on that. We're talking about that base skill, about how you can improve yourself as a more competitive player and gamer. So yeah, creating cheat sheets, getting that stuff into your kind of memory, where you don't, into your subconscious pretty much, where you know what type of things that you're going to be doing 99.9% of the time, and you know that other 0.1%, kind of what that range is. You've got tokens, you've got the stratagems, you've got it in your memory, but you're trying to limit it from your active memory. And not only that, you're doing that for your opponent. So putting a little kind of token thing with what psychic powers your spellcasters have, and putting it right behind your, especially if you're, say, a Chaos Zinch player, and you put it right behind all your demon princes, what powers they've got, right? That helps you, because you don't want to move that one guy who's got warp time to the wrong way, and then you go, right, casting warp time, oh crap, I've moved him. So it helps you immensely. But more than that, helps your opponent know which one they need to kill, and that is a little bit of a bad thing, but it means that they're not asking you at every 3 fucking seconds. So every second they're going to be asking to you, wait, where's your warp time guy? And then, not only that, let's say you do move your warp time guy away, and you've written on a piece of paper who's got warp time, and then you go to cast warp time, and then you accidentally say, oh yeah, no, this guy's got warp time, and then your opponent starts arguing about that, and you get caught a cheat, and let's pretend you did cheat. I don't recommend, of course, but it's like your reputation is hugely important. And now that game's pretty much gone, because not only is your opponent feel that you've got to cheat, there's bad blood, you've spent 10 minutes arguing it, calling the ref over. Now if you get to turn bloody 2, you'll be really lucky, and it's not on. Not only is not on, it's not a way for you to be a better player. Okay, so tokens. I also use colored tokens. So we've got just poker chips, and what I'll do is I'll actually write on the poker chips what it is, or if I've got like these really occasionally one-use things, or I do this to my opponents. I usually bring a bunch of poker chips for my opponent if they don't have tokens. Because they don't want to be super good or super competitive, and I've cast a negative power on them, or sorry, they've cast a buff on them, I'll just throw a token there. Just to remind myself, this guy has been buffed in some way. And if there's no token there, they haven't been buffed. And I'll just keep on throwing token after token. And so when it comes to their turn, and I say, right, what powers these guys got? And they list off 4 powers, but there's only 2 tokens. I know that there's something up. And this type of stuff is also protecting you as a player, making sure that you're not getting taken advantage of. All right, again, all before an event, you're doing all this stuff in preparation. You've got your list, and well, actually, we'll talk about the list in the next step. Sleep and some exercise. So this is a bit more advanced, but if you're going to be playing some of the bigger tournaments, you've got LVO, the ETC, CanCon here in Australia. If you're playing some of those really big tournaments that are 3 days, 8 games, just crazy amount of actually standing on your feet and just thinking that the whole body time. Getting enough sleep, not drinking too much during the thing, and getting a little bit of physical exercise just so you've got that stamina is important. That's pretty much, I can't say anything else about that. You're going to be aiming for 10 hours a day for about 3 days. Like that's where you kind of want to get to. Most of the biggest tournaments, that's about where you need to be. If you're just playing in a RTT, it's 3 games 1 day. It's still a long day, but you don't have to prepare that much for that compared to some of the bigger tournaments. All right, so if you've got any questions about this, is part 1, part 2, whatever part we're up to, for the before the event, throw it down there. Just put that in the comment, and we'll get into part 2, 3. All right, so next part, before the game. Now, you've done the before the event, which is the majority of stuff that you can do to improve your win rate. Now, before the game, so once at the end of this phase, so at the end of the before the game, so just as you're rolling your first dice for your movement phase or advance or whatever. So you've done your deployment, you've picked your sides, you've put your objectives, all that type of stuff, right? At the end of this before the game, so just before the game, turn 1 starts and you move your first model, about 70 to 80% of the game has been decided. If you're going to win or lose that game, 70 to 80% of it has been decided at the end of this phase, or at the end of this section. This has been my experience, and this is what I truly believe. It's so important, the before the event and then before the game, that you want to put most of your effort in thinking in these kind of 2 areas. And it's naturally just through time. Before an event, you're going to be in, while you're writing lists and doing list development, you're going to be putting most of your thinking there. But then what happens is people just rock up, they don't put too much thought into where the objectives are placed. In ITC, you can get away with that a little bit because it's fixed objectives. But, you'll rock up to a table, you won't necessarily think about the terrain. If it's fixed deployment, so some of the ETC missions, fixed deployment, you won't really think about how then that impacts which side you should pick. And you look at your opponent's list and you go, oh yeah, okay, cool, whatever. And you're not really trying to understand how their list works, how they think they're going to win, how they're going to stop you from winning, that type of thing. And you kind of deploy, and you always deploy in the same kind of way. And you deploy, and then you go to take turn 1. Your opponent wins that roll off and says, right, you go first. And you're going, hooray, I normally go first, that's what I want. And then you do absolutely nothing. And then they run circles around you. And they've won the game already. Before that first turn has started, they've already won the game. And that's what I've seen a lot of players do that. I've played against a lot of them. Even some really strong players where before we even start the game, I can tell them, okay, based on where the objectives are, how you've deployed, I've won this game. And I can even outline, I literally tell them how I've won this game, how the game's going to be going, and they're going, no, that's not going to happen. And then we play it out, and by turn 3, it's exactly as we talked about, kind of written the story of what this game is going to be. And this is what I mean by most of the game has been decided before you actually start turn 1. So, how do you improve these chances? Because that last 20 to 30% is just about keeping cool, under pressure, not getting tilted, not not stopping for, at the beginning of each turn and just saying, right, what is it that I should be doing, etc. Introduce yourself and try to be pleasant. This is always a bloody important thing to do. If you can, build some rapport with your opponent. Compliment his paint scheme, things like that. Be honest, not just being glib. This is that social contract thing where you're trying to be pleasant to the person, to your opponent, and to the person. It's easy if you know them or if you're friends, but regardless, especially if it's a brand new person, to you playing, that is. This is a little bit different to computer games. This is a board game or a tabletop miniature game, and for the next 2 hours, you're going to be talking to this guy or interacting with this guy face to face. And so just starting off in a pleasant way, handing him your list, which is kind of neatly laid out, shows that you're giving them respect. It's not chicken scratchings or a battle scribe with like every bit of information known to mankind, so they can't, they're literally getting a group of Mensa people looking at your list trying to decipher what exactly is in your list. I can see all the rules, but I can't actually see do you have 13 dudes or 40 dudes? You want to get off on the right foot. Don't try to hide or don't try to hide tricks or play gotcha 40k with your army or with your list. Now, I'm not trying to say that you need to tell your opponent every single bloody thing that your army does, nor do you have to kind of take them through what you're going to do or how you're going to win. You can state obvious things, and then you state some things which are key for them to know about, so that they don't get caught out. Now, this is a tough one, right? So I'll give some examples. I play Dark Elder quite often, and the Vexator Mask is something that I always make sure that my opponent fully understands what it is and what it can do. I say you can't overwatch this model, and that if you end a charge, you start at the start of the fight phase, if you're within 6 inches of this model, that unit, I can in essence make you fight last. I make sure that my opponent is clear that this thing, because this is a relic. This is a thing that hopefully now, because it's quite common, most people know about, but it's the ultimate gotcha. Like, if you don't tell your opponent that this is a thing, and they charge in with their giant unit of Gene Stealers, and you just go, you're fighting last, and my 3 units of Taluses are now going to chop you into pieces. They're going to hate you, and it's your family. They're going to. It will not be a pleasant game. And occasionally, I've done this you play a little bit of a mind game here, where you might overemphasize something. So you're telling them exactly what you're going to do, and hopefully it kind of changes their plan. So for example, and again, I'll use the Vexator Mask as the example here. And this is not me trying to be sneaky or anything like that, but this is just some things you can occasionally do where you can tell them exactly what they can do, a little bit of the trick, and then you might overemphasize kind of that thing so they're influenced in their deployment or what they do. So the Vexator Mask, I might say, for example, if you're playing against a custode army with bikes, it can make a custody bike unit fight last even if it's swooping dived, or whatever it's called. And I'll make sure I overemphasize, I make sure I kind of tell my opponent and what that means for them. Because then they're less likely to do that. And so I won't need to say, if I don't have Vect, the agents of Vect in my army. But also, it means that they might be less aggressive with that unit of bikes, which actually helps me, or it might help me. And so I might overemphasize something. This is an advanced tactic. If you're just starting out, you don't have to worry about this. But this is just an example where you might overemphasize something just so that your opponent plays a little bit differently, and it actually helps you out a little bit. And just try not to be too stupid or sneaky about this. So something that I like doing, and so what I'll do is, hopefully you can see this. So this is a list. This is a common list that I would use, and I'll make sure that, for example, my psychers, what powers they've got as default. So this is something that's recommended by the ETC, and it really helps kind of speed up the stuff in the beginning, and it also shows that you're being transparent, because let's say you forget accidentally, well, you've got it on your list. What relics are, kind of what, so like I've got here, Ulfway is 6+ Feel No Pain. What the spells are and what the powers I need to cast these. I like doing this in my list, because I can give it to my opponent, they can look through it, and they can even keep it next to them. And so then if I'm going to cast something, so one of the things I always find amusing is that warp time is, I think, only power 6 or something like that. And the first time my opponent told me that, I was like, rubbish, show me. And they would show me, and I'm like, alright. But I like listing the kind of like the power of a spell on my list. Like, I like writing it down on my list, so that when I say, okay, cool, I only need a 6 to cast that, or a 7, or whatever, they're not questioning as much. Look, I'm always happy to show them in my book, but if they got a quick reference, and again, this is it doesn't hurt in any way, but it just helps. These are things that you can do before a game, and also before an event, because you're listing it in your army list. That it's just helping that transparency. It's helping that intention. It's helping to show that your opponent can be comfortable and play a quick and friendly game, and not be stressed that you're just trying to screw them all the time. So we're going to have a look at. So normally in the training, I would be going through some example lists. I would use the list that you've just built as the thing that we're going to be kind of discussing, and a random list that I've picked from some of the bigger tournaments. What we'll do is I'll just describe a list. So for this training, I'll just describe a list, and I want you to then pause it after I say what the list is. You pause it and think about what that actually means, and then the list that you've kind of created for the rest of this example, use the list that I've just talked about and your list that you've done in the previous part for these kind of next few sections. So we've got a list of 5 wave serpents. Okay? 5 wave serpents, some guardians, a bunch of 10-man guardians, a bunch of rangers, 2 fire prisms, and 3 planes. 2 crimson hunters, 1 hemlock. Farsi and a pear tree. Let's pretend that's the list, right? Now, whenever you have a quick look at that list, what type of list is that? So your opponent just showed that to you. It's all Alatok, of course, nothing Jinari, and you look at that and go, right, what type of list is this? You can hit pause and just have a think about that. So that type of list is more than likely going to be some sort of defensive list, kind of aiming to take the hit, not really lose too much, and then unload all his dudes and really take whatever hit them out, and then push on to objectives and things like that. That's easy enough to understand. So you're as a, say, beginner to intermediate player, this is the type of thing you need to be able to look at, understand, and say to yourself, cool, this is kind of how that list operates. If I am playing a offensive style list, I need to be careful not to overextend, because this list is a defensive style list. It is designed to take a hit, and if it's designed to take a hit, and if I overextend, I'm going to get punished for it. Okay? So there's a few things I want to cover here, but one of the things, you can't fully generalize, because where I got this particular list from, this same tournament, two players took very, very similar lists. Okay? So they had lots of wave serpents and other Eldar things, all Alatok, of course. However, one player, the weaponry and the kind of upgrades on that particular, on their vehicles were different to the other. So what am I talking about? The one player who was playing a defensive style list took scatter lasers, crystal targeting matrix, and spirit stones on all his wave serpents, which means it's a much more defensive style list. It can sit back and wants to sit back at 36 inches, or between 24 and 36 inches. It's going to slowly, it can shoot you at that longer range, saying, you need to engage me, but if you do, I've got lots of guys inside. And wave serpents are hard to kill, and when you got spirit stones on them, it's just even more so. The other list, he put shuriken cannons on it, and what's it called? The advance and neg 1. Really should know what the upgrade is called. Anyway, it's the one that, if you advance, you get an additional neg 1. Vectored engine, I think it is. Something like that. That list, however, it's still a defensive style list, but now it's operating at much closer range. It has to be within 24 as opposed to up to 36 inches. It's always going to be advancing, right? Or it's going to be advancing as much as possible. And it has the option, so it's less defensive or sit back and control thing. It has the option of playing kind of offensive gunboats, and it's not as scared of getting within 12 inches, so that if its Alatok thing's not working, it's still got the neg to hit because of the vectored engine upgrade. And you can see, even though the armies are very, very similar, they could potentially play differently. Okay. But this is now moving to intermediate territory here, where being able to recognize, so just understanding the archetype, it's a defensive style list, and that's kind of the where you want to aim to. You want to be able to look at every single list known to mankind, and or kind or whatever kind, and have a general idea of, is this an offensive list or is this a defensive list? Does it want to control the board, or is it looking to overwhelm me in firepower or whatever, right? You should be able to get just that archetype. Then you move on to the next part, which is what upgrades or what special things are in this list that makes it different from, or that might change it from just a kind of defensive style list. Is there something that makes it slightly, say, more offensive or more defensive, more wanting to control the board or snipe out characters or something like that? You get the gist. So yeah, that's the list. Alright, so the list we've just talked about. Scatter lasers, spirit stones, lots of wave serpents, 2 fire prisms, and a couple of planes. Very defensive Eldar list. Looking to slowly control objectives, control the board. If you get too close, it will punish you. You can't really engage it from distance because its defensiveness doesn't come from melee. Its defensiveness comes from range, and then if you do get close, it's got that counter punch, or it can punish that. And it's exactly what I was talking about from a defensive style list. So now your list that you've just written, or the archetype or whatever we did back in part 1 or 2, whatever we called it, have a think about, we're going to say have a think about these 3 things. Say, how am I going to win? So have a think about the list that you've just written, and you've probably already done this, but how are you going to win? That's step 1. And then if you know the memes where it's got like the 100 IQ, 200 IQ, 300 IQ, you know, the brain, things like that. So 100 IQ, how am I going to win? Don't care about what my opponent does, etc., etc. How am I going to win? Next level, how is my opponent going to win? Okay? So you think about what are they trying to achieve? You know, what's their play style? How are they looking to win? Next level, how does how they want to win interact with how I'm going to win? And vice versa, right? So it's like, I want to win by shooting my opponent off the board, and they want to win by just surviving. For example, let's pretend use Tower Gun Line versus this Eldar list. I want to shoot him off the board, but I'm at -2 to hit for most of his army, or something like that. Which means it's going to be really hard to do that. That's that level 3. So level 1 is my army, I'm Tau. I want to blow everyone off the board. Woohoo! Level 2, my opponent wants to survive. Level 3, well, if these are the 2 armies, my army's going to have a really hard time shooting them off the board because he can survive. And because he's got the maneuverability, he can move 14 inches or 16 inches with the wave serpents, and I am a tower gun line, it's going to be difficult to push him off objectives and things like that, right? And so this is that level 3. It's like, now I know what I want to do, now I know what my opponent wants to do, and now I've thought about how we kind of interact and what that means for each other. Now the last, there might be more levels, but the last level, this is where I like playing around, is I focus a little less on how I'm going to win, and I focus more on how I'm going to prevent my opponent from winning. Now I know this, it seems a little technical, but I like playing offensive reactive style lists where I'm just trying to shut down my opponent. Whatever they're trying to do, I should have a good idea about what they're trying to do in terms of winning. And then I'm just trying to prevent a lot of different things. I'm just trying to, whatever they're trying to do, I'm going to be stopping. I'm not trying to do anything in particular. I'm just trying to stop whatever they're doing. And that's how I'll win. And a lot of my armies that I design are kind of like that. They're reactive. They can, if they see an opportunity, they can capitalize on that. So I try and play those type of armies, or at least have elements of that in almost every army I run. And so I focus more about understanding what my opponent wants to do, and then working out efficient or effective ways of preventing them doing what they want to do. And it could be through objective placement, picking the right side, deployment, and it's usually all of these things, and having elements in my army that are like wild cards. And the Solitaire is a perfect example of that wild card, where it's always going to kind of just hover about, and then, oh, my opponent's made a mistake because I've overloaded one portion of it, so he's left a gap. Now my Solitaire will just go in and pounce, something like that. All right. So in the normal training, we would do quite a bit more work on that, probably about 20 minutes to half an hour on just that, and then we'd go into these the next few activities, which is about looking at a board, terrain, picking terrain, identifying terrain, placing objectives, things like that. So we'll do a quick version of that as part of this, but it's difficult to do that without really being one-on-one, and that's if that's something that interests you guys, you can hit me up, and if you're in Brisbane or Australia, we can organise actually doing a one-on-one and do a lot more of that type of training. Alrighty, so we're doing the activity, and this is a table. Sorry if the little bits on the edge are cut off, but you get the gist here. So you rock up to this table, and I understand from that angle it's not, you can't see exactly what line of sight bits and things. You definitely have to be able to, you know, put your head down, see exactly what avenues of shooting, etc. are. But you should be able to walk up to a table, even just from one angle, and just identify one or two key pieces of terrain that's going to have an kind of like an overwhelming or an oversized impact to that particular game. Okay? So this table here, I would suggest this large ruin right here is going to have a very large impact to this game, not just because it's big, right? So, or an oversized impact to this game, not just because it's a large ruin, but because of the positioning of it. So it is kind of offset to one side on both, or to one quarter, and it's still very close to the center. So straight away, this piece sings out to me. Also, the table as a whole is a bit light on terrain, especially for an 8th ed table or 8th ed tournament, which could mean either you're playing on a light table for a team event, such as the ETC, something like that, or you're playing on, say, in a tournament where the club or whoever's hosting it hasn't got enough terrain, or hasn't updated all their terrain to 8th ed. Anyway, something like this is not unheard of. You still got a good range of, or a good mix of terrain. You've got some ruins, you've got some buildings that you can walk around but you can't walk into. You've got some trees, old forests, and craters. And you always have to remember that craters and forests are the neg to the charge one, and so it does impact into kind of avenues of charging, and where you're going to put your base, etc, etc. So rocking up to a table, you go, cool, this is a key piece of terrain here. This also is a key piece of terrain. It's a smaller building, which means people aren't going to be inside, but it's completely line of sight blocking, and it's very close to the center. And then conversely, you've got, the neg to the charge craters / forest on this side here. And so you kind of start getting an idea, you get a feel of what this table is going to be. Light table, some center ruins / buildings. So depending on what mission you're going to be playing, and depending on where objectives are placed and what your opponent's playing, etc, etc, there's going to be lots of things you have to think about. Okay, so that's the basics about doing terrain, or just getting a good feel for what the table is going to be doing. So, thinking about your list, right? You've got your list. I'm just going to pick a Tau gun line, something like that. But whatever your list is that you've come up with, that's what we're going to be looking at this table. Your opponent, as we discussed, is going to be the defensive style Eldar Wave Serpent spam list. Okay? What does that mean for us? So you're thinking about your list. This table, for purposes of this mission, we're going to be doing ITC mission 4. So we'll talk about the missions in a second, but if you just remember, ITC mission 4 is 1 in the center, right here, and each person gets 2 objectives. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 has to be placed in your anywhere on the table, and one has to be placed on in your opponent's deployment zone. But we'll put that to the side for a moment. We're thinking, what is my army trying to do? So this is our table, right? Cool, some key things. What's my army trying to do? So I can pause there while you have a think about that, or you just pause the video. For Tau gunline, my army wants to shoot the crap out of my opponent. It has some maneuverability, etc. But because I want to do a lot of shooting, I don't want to have too much line of sight blocking in between me and my opponent. And again, some Tau gun lines don't care. You have a lot of SMS and things like that, so they don't actually mind about line of sight blocking. Others do. It just really depends on your army. But let's pretend it's just lots of fire warriors and things like that, right? So you've got a range of about 30, 36 inches if you move. So you got around 30 inches of shooting, lots of models. You don't want to be in melee. Okay, and you need line of sight. So that's what Tau guys need. And you go, okay, cool. So you want to be very careful about this. This piece of terrain is now super dangerous for you. Unless you're playing hammer and anvil, and you can deploy, I think this is, I'll just grab a tape measure here. Where's the 24? 24 is here. So, you know, you'll have to move up close to your opponent. That's not necessarily a particularly good thing. And then what it means though is, like, so let's say you deploy on the line, they can now deep strike, you know, let's say they've got like a bloodletter bomb or something crazy like that. They'll deep strike here, out of line of sight of you, and then charge your entire army, and you can't overwatch them. You know, so these are, straight away, you can see, ooh, that's not going to be good for me. Doesn't matter where the objectives are, doesn't matter what the deployment zone, you can identify these things. You go, crap, that's not going to be good. Our opponent, yeah, so that was just an example of a bloodletter bomb. We're not playing bloodletters for this particular pretend match. We're going to be playing the Eldar Wave Serpents, but they've got some flyers. So flyers, you can use them with ruins to snipe out characters and stuff like that if you're not careful. So you have to be thinking about that. And you just have to, and again, I don't know what your list is, whatever you've written down, but you just got to keep these things in mind. You keep your key pieces of terrain, what your army wants to do, what your opponent wants to do. So I want to shoot them. They don't want to be shot. They're defensive list. They can take the shots. They can kill most of mine. So again, thinking my Tau against this Eldar. They've got the scatter lasers. They can kill. They can slowly whittle down my shooting while getting into position onto the objectives. Okay, so now I'm starting to generate some ideas. They'll look for opportunities to snipe out my characters. I'm going to have to do a hard slog to kill any of their vehicles. So what I want to do, I want to make as they're going to want, so I'm going to predict, I'm writing the game. They're going to want to spread the objectives. They want to spread the objectives far and wide. Okay? I don't want that. I personally don't, like, say I'm a Tau player, I don't really care if they're spread wide or not, but my opponent wants them spread wide because then it starts splitting me up. So I don't want it because he doesn't want it, or she doesn't want it, you know? So, okay, so I want to kind of centralize my my objectives. I want to keep it in the bubble because that's how my army works. They don't care if they're split or not. So let's keep everything nice and compact. Maybe we turn this, if it's not a hammer and anvil game, we'll turn it into a hammer and anvil game. We'll try and have, you know, 3 objectives. So we'll hold maybe the middle one, or dominate the middle one and hold our 2 and make it, and so that means we want to go second. So if we want to do it that way, we want to go second. So these, as you can see and hear, this is all the stuff that I do in the first 5 minutes of looking at someone's list, looking at the table, looking at what the mission is, and thinking about how that game's going to be. So this is what I mean by there's an oversized portion of a game where you need to think. And it's usually this 5 minutes at the start of a game before you decide what side you want, if you want to go first, etc., etc. It's right now. This is where you start writing out what the game's going to look like. What is this game going to be from start to finish? And you just need an outline. You don't need a in detail thing, because that happens through the game. You just need an outline, and you need to make sure that you don't stuff up in any of these beginning bits. So where's my little cheat sheet? So I'll just grab my cheat sheet of the maps. So as you can see, I've got hopefully you can see that. Got a cheat sheet of all the secondaries for ITC and the different types of maps, etc. Again, just speeding up. I want to speed up the start of the game. Like all the secondary stuff, like I can hand someone a list. I have everything listed there, because while they're looking at my list, I'm paying attention to the table. I'm thinking about this game. The less I have to talk, it's really bad, but the less I have to talk to my opponent, explaining stuff about my list, other than really key things like vexated marks, etc., etc. But the more I can really focus on thinking about how this game's going to be going. So here's my roll, and here's my opponents on my left. So we go like this. So I got a 6. So that means I get to pick I get to pick which side. I roll a 1. It's now pointy hammer and anvil. So something else I like doing, because I like visualizing. This stuff. So I'll actually mark out what the table's going to look like. All right. So we've got pointy hammer and anvil. That's the 12 on each side. That. Sorry about the noise. Alright, so we've got 12 on each side, 9 from the middle. Let's just mark it out. Alright, and you might as well put just a couple of dice in between. There's no harm. And so from this, I can now start visualizing, because we're playing ITC Mission 4. And again, I use this one as a great training one, because it has objective placement, which all ETC missions has, and it's one of the ITC missions. So it's a good one to practice on to keep abreast of both ITC and ETC style missions. Alright, so I like, before I pick a side, I also like thinking about where the objectives might be, okay, and what my opponent's going to be doing. So this piece here, this side here means I get to control this piece of ruin. Does that help me and my game? Versus this side here. So we've got 2 ruins in the corners versus 1 ruin in the middle and 1 ruin in the corner. And this has got a building in the middle. What happens if I take this side? If I take this side, my opponent gets this big ruin right here. He gets easy access to the center, say parking a wave serpent right here on the edge, something like that. And then the rest of his wave serpents can hide kind of within this building, getting cover saves, parking up here, etc. If he gets this side, he can do similar, but he'll be using these corners. Now I can push up to the middle, and that one turn that I want to smack him, so to speak, I can jump out and I will have the range 30 inches pretty much to cover everything here. So now it comes back to, do I gain anything? So this is something else it's another key thing about terrain. You say to yourself, do I gain anything by terrain? So my current army, it's pretty much all 4-up invo. So you know, lots of grotesques, etc. Other than line of sight blocking, I don't need terrain. I don't care about terrain. So terrain's usually not a consideration for me in terms of benefits to me. However, this is a big one. This is a really big one, guys. I like taking terrain away from my opponent to make my game easier. So usually terrain, if you don't need terrain in any way, or you know, any particular piece of terrain, so for example, if you had lots of mortars, this piece of terrain, you might want to take this because you've got 2 pieces of terrain in your deployment zone that's, you know, good line of sight blocking, whereas this one you might have to take a turn or 2 to move behind. So you might pick this one. I think the Tower player would actually want to take this one here to take this piece away from the Elder player. Not because the Elder player, not because the Tower player really needs this piece of terrain. It's because the Elder player would benefit from this piece of terrain, if you get what I mean. So, that's just the quick version. There's lots more discussion I could do, especially if, depending on what the deployment was, if it was Dawn of War, if it was pure hammer and anvil, etc., etc. So there's lots of permutations to this, and this is what we'd be doing more of if we did the one-on-one training. We could spend another 45 minutes. I've spent like 3 hours with some of the people that I've done some training with on just this. You know, just talking about terrain, talking about maps, placing objectives. Like we've done 3 hours over and over of just the same army and just kind of doing the picking of the sides, placing objectives, and deploying. And not even actually deploying the models, literally just saying this, this, and this would be here. Alright, so objectives. Now, I like thinking about the one that I have to put in my opponent's deployment zone, which is last, but I like thinking about where it would be first. So I either say to myself, right, I have one anywhere, so we'll put that to the side, and then I have to put one in my opponent's deployment zone. So if I'm on this side here, and I'm pushing up this way, I've got my, you know, lots of fire warriors, say here, I'm going to push into this building. I'm going to own this building. So my one anywhere is probably going to be somewhere here, right? But this is a possibility. I haven't placed this here because I'm going to be thinking about my opponent, where they're going to put it. So we'll just do that for a second. My one in my opponent's deployment zone, I want it here somewhere. On the deployment line, like just in, and somewhere here. So then when I'm in this building, I can shoot anything that's on there. So my one is going to be here somewhere. Okay? Pretty self-evident. Alright, so if my elder opponent was smart, they would be thinking this exact same thing. Right? So, and as a Tower player, we're going to be doing the same thing. So we're going to say, where do you think my opponent's going to want to place it? Right? They're going to say, I want to put my anywhere here. So that means they're going to put their one in my opponent, you know, in my deployment zone, maybe right in this back corner. I don't know if you can see it back here. So right back here, or maybe right back here, something like that. You know, like really, really out of the way, nowhere near terrain. I don't know, maybe even something. No, probably in this back corner here, because it's not like they'll have clear line of sight to shooting here. 6 and 6. Something like that, because in that back corner, like in this one up here, it's beneficial for me. So if that's where we think the elder player is going to place it, because anywhere else is still better for me, they probably won't put it here because it's just too easy for us to reach. So they'll probably put it back here, right? That's where we think they're going to put it. I want to put it here. My one in my opponent's deployment zone. I want to put my first one here within 12 inches of the center. Really here, so it's even touching this piece of terrain, right? So I can sit in the terrain, I can do lots of shots, I'm loving life, and I'm a happy tower player. My elder opponent will go right, my first one that I'm going to be putting. You know, you say, where would they put it? Well, maybe they'll put it in this back corner, but no. They will say to themselves, I reckon my elder opponent, my tower opponent is going to place it somewhere here. That's where I would put it. And so they will counter deploy their first one, something like this, to bubble out. Because remember, you can't place it within 12 and they have to place it in the deployment zone. So something like that, about there, that now counters this tower player placing it here. Now where can he put it? They can put it, you know, over here, which is great for the elder player, or over here. And look at that. Both of those are wonderful. So you say to yourself, is this going to be beneficial for me as the tower player? Can I prevent this in any way, other than picking a different side? Possibly not. And so, this is exactly what I want you guys to do. Exactly what I'm talking about. Thinking about, where am I going to put my first one, and the best spot for it, but also, is there a way I can stop my opponent getting a great objective placement? And so that's probably what this layout here, that's probably what the objectives will be looking like at the end of this, right? So the tower player places his first one right here. Elder here to bubble out from that. Tower places their second one. They don't really want it over here because it will be out of line of sight and it's really hard to get to. So they'll put it as close as they can on this line up here, while still being in the deployment zone, right? So they're still covering it, but it's not as bad as in this corner up here. So this is tower number 2, and then elder number 2 is all the way in this back corner here. So now the elder goes, right, now I know what the objectives are. I know what my tower opponent is going to be doing. He's going to be putting stuff here. I'm going to put one fire prism in this back corner, one fire prism in this corner. I can shoot up and down this row, and I'm going to use my wave serpents to push up here to get around this piece of terrain. I'm going to push up this way and eventually hold 1, 2, 3. I'm going to give up the middle, I'm going to give up that one, but hold these 3 around the edges. I'm now spread, because that's what I want to do. I want to get away from his, from their big bubble thing here, 30 inches. I can get away with it pretty well. I'll hide someone behind this piece of terrain. Over here, I'll take some fire, but it won't be rapid fire. And I'll take 1 turn of fire as I'm rushing back to this corner here. So that's the elder player. Tower player goes, right, now I know what they're going to be doing. I need to prevent the elder player pushing here. So I want to hold these 2 and this one. And because I know that the elder player is going to want to push through down this corridor, we're going to be fighting a lot here. We're not going to be fighting up here. And you can map out what this game is going to look like. You're writing the book, in essence. You're writing the story of this game before you even started. Through the objective places, through what side you've picked. And then you say to yourself, am I going to want to go first or second? That's it. Do I see any benefit in going first in terms of an alpha strike in this game? For both players, the answer is no. I'm telling you right now, neither player wants to go first in this game. They both want to go second. They want to always have that, you know, even if it offers a sacrifice. So the tower player throwing 1 fire unit per turn onto the center objective to hold more. So they hold 3 to 2 to get that 1 extra point. And the elder player to have that right of response. So when the elder player goes second, and the tower player moves the fire warrior unit onto here, they want to blow everything onto that and kill that unit so that it's 2 to 2. So they don't get a second point until kind of turn 3 and 4 when they're pushing up to this objective. So both players want to go second. How this game will pretty much happen has now been written. And now you just deploy, right? You know that the bubble, the big unit, all the fire warriors, etc., are going to be back here. How we're going to deploy to push up and do the story. And then you just say to yourself, is there anything I can do to prevent that? Tower player can be really cognizant of this. Put some stuff in this back corner here, always on this objective, and just force, just make it like push this way. Hopefully you can see it. So push this way, and maybe even push into this tree, like into these trees. So you're covering this angle here. So you want to hold these 3 and you're pushing into these trees, and you're giving up a little bit of this piece of terrain. You're not focusing your bubble completely here. You won't be as defensive because you won't all be in terrain or out of line of sight, but you're going to use this piece of terrain. So that's how you can kind of now say, right, that's the story. So let's pretend both people know what the story is. They can see what the game is. They're both awesome as each other. Tower player can push up into this tree rather than just sitting here. Elder player, they're probably just going to still have to push through here, do as much damage as they can as they're pushing into, as the tower player is pushing into this tree. Maybe unload some of their units to really dig these guys out, and hopefully go second. So that's it. That's about it. That's what I try to do in the first 5 minutes of any game. So we did it in about 20 minutes or whatever it took. This is what I try to run through, and I try to write the story of the game in 5 minutes before we start the game. And that's it. And then once the game starts, it's just about not stuffing up. And we'll get to that in the next section. Alright, so just before we get into the table stuff, last few things before the game. Definitely recommend, especially if you're trying to be more competitive, is to start using a chess clock. This is one of the time things, so if you remember, intention, transparency, and time. So one of the time things, this is both for yourself, but also for your opponent, making it so that they feel like they've had the fair amount of time. You might be running a horde, or they might be running a horde, bit of a protective thing. Use a chess clock. Making sure that your opponent understands that while you might be running a horde, you're actually playing quite fast, and they're only playing knights, but they're actually taking more of the time. Making it really transparent, using a chess clock, it solves a whole bunch of problems. I only just, probably the last year and a half, started using a chess clock, and even now in some of my training games, just here at home, I'll be using chess clocks with people. And again, it's just to keep the training up. In 40k, in now higher level competitive 40k, it's getting much more common. But in other game systems, we'll say like War Machine, it's actually, I think it's part of the rule set. It's, using chess clocks is the way. Whereas in 40k, it's still gaining acceptance. It's not the default. The one I use, and you can look on online, eBay, Amazon, and pretty much anywhere. The one I use is this one here. It's the PQ9907S with the Leap version. We've got it here. Not sponsored or anything like that. It's like $15, $20, something like that. It's quite cheap. Really easy to set up. So there's a button there. Turn it on. I'm sure there's online help for that. And press and hold that. it starts blinking, you can add time, remove time, and once you're happy, hit play, and you just knock it. Really easy. Something I recommend, this is how I do it. So say, for example, you've got an hour and 15 minutes each. So it's a 2.5 hour game, like round time. What I'll do, and you would have seen that in the setup here, zooms in. So I give each person an hour and 10. That works out to 2 hours and 20 minutes. And that other 10 minutes, I call admin time. So I set this up for an hour and 10 each. The first 4 to 5 minutes is usually, getting to your table, showing lists, talking about terrain, and then, you've probably wasted or used, 5 to 6 minutes already. The other 4 minutes is at the end of each turn, and especially for ITC. ITC, I really feel you need to do this, which is at the end of every single turn, you quickly pause it, because whenever anyone has to do scoring, they feel, oh, it's eating into my time, especially when you're getting to the end of it. What you do is you hit pause, you do the score sheet, so you go to your ITC score sheet, you say, did I kill one? Yes, etc. You do that, and then you get back into the game and you hit unpause. It takes 20 seconds. But 20 seconds times 2, say 40 seconds every turn, and there's 6 turns, and that's that other 5 minutes. Okay? And that's it. So that's what I like doing. I like taking off 10 minutes, doesn't matter what the round time is, it's like 3 hour round time, I just take off 10 minutes and then halve that. I have found all but 2 games in the last 6-7 months that has worked very, very well. The few times that doesn't work, and these are the 2 instances that didn't work, was if the TO extends the round time. You can't really plan for that, so it kind of throws out the chess clock. Because then, let's say you've got an extra 10 minutes on the round time, but you've both almost timed out. How do you? It just throws that all out. TOs probably shouldn't do that, if I was to be honest. But anyway, and the other time it doesn't work is if you have extensive rules, queries, and things like that. So there was one game where we had to call a TO over right near the end of the game, and that took, I don't know, it was about 6 or 7 minutes, and because it wasn't any one particular player, it wasn't eating into their time. In fact, one player had timed out, so my opponent had timed out, and he was the one calling the TO over for something that he was trying to do. And anyway, I don't want to get into it. The point is, it works. Take off 10 minutes, halve that, pause it in the beginning just when you're setting up, pause it when you're doing scores. Very few people get a set. They feel like they've gotten their fair share of time, which is, this is again, this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to promote good blood, not have any type of bad blood. If anyone says, oh, you've taken all the time, you're playing a slow game, etc., etc., you've got backup for you. You're protecting yourself, you're protecting your reputation, and you're making sure that you get your fair share of the time, of the rules, whatever. So that's the chess clock, and I definitely recommend using it in pretty much every game that you play, in any tournament, and even at home. I'd recommend practicing with it when you're planning up for an event. The last few things that I do, I'm just double check, cool, is these type of tokens, like tactical templates. These, if you can see them, so these are I've made for the Godhammer group, and so I've provided them to the ETC, Australian ETC team, and the Queensland team, and pretty much all the Godhammer players. I find having these super time savers, and not only that, making it clear what the intention is in terms of movement and things like that. So any type of tack templates, I'm sure you've seen these before, but this is 1 inch, 6 inch, 2 inch, and 3 inch. And these are important, so 3 inch is important for pile-ins, coherency, 6 inch is general kind of movement, and 1 inch is to make sure, you're within combat range and things like that. And this 9 inch one, I've got a couple of these actually that I use because I mark them on the board for deep striking. So when I'm saying, right, where I've placed my models, you can't deep strike that. My intention is I blocked all of this area for a deep strike. I use these and I show them that, and it's just so much. These are just so much more clear than a tape measure for certain angles, or your opponent can't really see. Whereas they can see if that's 3 inches and you've piled in 3, and from that thing you're within 1 inch. It's just really, really good practice. So I mean, you don't have to buy something like this, and we're not selling these at the moment. Maybe I should, but but getting something like this, and I'm sure there are plenty of people online that are selling these type of things, I fully recommend. And in fact, when people don't use things like this, but they use their tape measure and they're trying to measure 3 inches, and it actually annoys me. I know it sounds weird, but because at certain angles, you can't tell. Like if it's very close, let's say they rolled a 4 and they're 5.1 inches away. It's really, really hard to get that, especially if all the models all kind of clumped together. You get the idea. Whereas if you had something like this and you could actually measure out the 3 inches, or let's say they were 4 inches away and you measure the 3, so something like that, right? You could actually, it's really clear because you can get in and out and around and things like that. I've seen people argue about that. It's like, oh no, you're out, and then you get a template which literally marks it out, and then they can't argue, and then they feel that you haven't cheated them, and you feel like they haven't tried to cheat you. Again, preventing bad blood, preventing anger, clearing your head from any bad thoughts, also preventing arguments and time wasting, because again, you only got an hour and 10 minutes to play your part of the game. Other things that I use, and this is something I need to thank pretty much every other country in the world at the ETC, which is giant objective markers, right? So when we went to the ETC, we had ordinary objective markers like poker chips in essence, and this was what Australia brought, and almost every other country at the ETC we're using these style, so 6 inch diameter objective markers, because the way the ETC was ruling them, the center of the point was, you have to measure from the center to the edge, which is the rule book. And so it didn't matter how big these things were. So if you had a poker chip like here, it didn't make a difference because you're measuring from the center. Okay? Whereas when other countries were running these, you could put a model. Don't have a model on me just yet. Let's get a poker chip. So this is a poker chip. If your model was touching this objective, I'll make sure you guys can see. So if you're here, if you're standing there, you're not on the objective. And you don't have to try and measure, am I within 3 or whatever. If you're standing on it like this, there is no argument. I'm on the objective. You can clearly say, my intention is to be on 3 inches. You're touching the objective, so that means you are, not only are you intending to do, but you actually are. And therefore, if something gets knocked, it's very clear to just fix that up. As opposed to, you move there and you say, oh, I'm saying it's within 3. But your opponent goes, oh, I'm not sure, and then they feel that it's a bit rude if they go over and double check that you're actually within 3, but they don't need to when they can just see, oh, yep, you're on. And also, if you've seen any of my other videos, these appear really, really well on battle reports. And not only that, if you're on stream. So I've been on stream a couple of times, especially with these, and the streaming, like the people commentating on the streams, they love you. When you've got giant objectives like this, they absolutely love you. I know it's a little bit of vanity, but as 40k becomes a bit more competitive, a bit more professional, more and more streams are happening all the time. That's why you're taking this training. These things, I know it seems like a little thing, but I'm a convert. Like, to me, I after using these now for about almost 6 months, I would never go back to normal objectives. I'll use them if my opponent's insisting, but if I'm going to be using objectives, it's always these. Even in training and all that, I love these. I think these are wonderful. All right, so we're going to get into some more activities. It's going to be walking up to the table, looking at the table, identifying key bits of terrain, picking sides, and kind of understanding what the map would look like, thinking about how my opponent is going to win the game, how I'm going to try to win the game, how those two things interact, what that means then for objective placement. Objective placement in ETC is a huge thing. In ITC, it's only a kind of important thing for 2 missions, really one. I'd see objective, I'd see mission number 4, which you actually have to place. But still, it's an important concept to really understand, because you can lose games straight away by just really poor objective placement. I've both won and lost games just through poor objective placement, either by myself or my opponent. And then deployment, talking about deployment, where will we deploy things, and then first turn discussions, would we want to go first or not. So that would be the kind of last, we're going to be doing that in a second, and that will be the end of this section. Alright, so we've just gone through before the game. All the different stages, picking a table, picking a side, deploying your army, all that things, right? So now we're going to during a game. And as I said before, most of the game, if you're going to win or lose this game, has now been decided. Just as you're starting that turn 1, you're about to move your first model, it's been decided about 70-80% of the game. It's now just about not stuffing up. So during the game, playing fast is important, but also playing tight. And what I mean by playing tight is making it so your opponent's never thinking that you're doing anything dodgy. You know, you're playing tight with your rules, like you're playing the correct rules. You're not moving more than you're allowed to. You're not moving and then moving back and moving in a different direction, and now all of a sudden what was a 5-inch charge is now a 1-inch charge, or something stupid like that. You're not rolling quickly, as in you're not rolling behind the building where your opponent can't see, scooping up what you think are all the hits without letting your opponent have a quick look, and then rolling it again and just saying, yep, alright, cool. Take 7 saves, and your opponent has no idea what's just happened, so you haven't declared, what shot? Oh, okay, and what did it shoot, and who did it shoot at, and what were you hitting on? Because remember, this has got neg 1. All of this type of stuff. This is what this phase is. This is what this part of it. During the game, hopefully, all this prep work that you've done is meaning that the rest of the focus is just about putting in action the plan that you did before the game. So you said, I'm going to win the game here, I'm going to prevent that. Putting all that stuff into action, and just not doing anything that's falling into traps, in essence, or making it so your opponent is feeling really upset because you're doing something really dodgy. Yeah, that's it. And just staying cool. So if your opponent's doing something dodgy, standing up for yourself and just staying cool, making sure that they're not trying to take advantage of you, and you can do some of those things to prevent it by speaking up, but also using your chess clock, etc. So, Point one, question things if unsure. Again, this is the don't let people take advantage of you. If something sounds a bit dodgy or sounds too good to be true, it might be a GW rule. But just ask them. Just be really polite. Say, hey, can you just show me where it is in the rulebook or in your codex, or just say, hey, can I grab your codex for a second? I just want to check something, and just check it. I've caught out. I have picked up a number of mistakes my opponents have been making, and people have done to me. Like I have played in the last 3 tournaments. I played, say, one rule slightly incorrectly that I was under the impression it worked one way, and then my opponent picked it up and was like, no, it doesn't work like that. It works like this one. I went, holy moly, I've been playing it for 6 months. Nobody's perfect, and this is why I don't attribute malice. What's the saying? Don't attribute malice to someone when it could just be stupidity or incompetence or something like that. So I don't assume people are cheating. I'm just saying, I just want to confirm. I'm going to believe whatever you just told me. Go ahead, but I just want to confirm it. And then when you pick them up on it, you say, hey, let's just redo that bit with this new ruling. Or will it make any difference? No, but can you please make sure you play it this way? I also, and this is something I personally do, and I recommend doing it. I will tell the TO if I personally have been playing a rule wrong. So this is a kind of reputation protection thing. So I'll go and tell the TO, hey man, the last 2 games I was playing this rule wrong. I thought it worked this way, my opponent just picked it up. I went and talked to my previous opponents, I apologized, but I just want to let you know. Because if it ever gets back that I was doing that and I haven't been kind of transparent about it, you get a bad reputation, and it's not a good thing. You got to kind of protect that reputation if you're looking to be highly competitive. The other thing I like doing, or I try to do, because it's important from a TO point of view. I've been a TO, and I know TOs that really appreciate this, which is you tell the TO if one particular player has done the wrong thing. So I'm more than happy if my opponents had then gone and told the TO that I was playing something wrong, because the TO can then say, cool, just take a note of that in essence. And then if later on that tournament, another one of their opponents picks them up on that, now they've got a kind of like a history of bad behavior, something like that. If they didn't know, if this is the first time that they've heard of this, yet they've been doing it to every one of their opponents, they can't do anything about it. It's like, well, why didn't you tell me that an hour ago or a day ago? But 2, it's now kind of hearsay. It's like, oh, well, maybe you all just got together and said, yeah, my opponent did that, definitely. Whereas if you happened at the time, they're kind of like uncorroborated? No, they're not working together. Whatever the word is. It's like if one opponent says it and then the next opponent says it and the next opponent says it, that's way stronger than if all 3 opponents come on round 3 and say it. Just because from a TO point of view, you have to always really be careful, especially if it's a big tournament. Those 3 opponents might all be friends or might all know each other, and they said, this guy's a jerk. Yeah, let's all go ping him, right? Anyway, I've seen it happen, and this is something I recommend. Take it with a grain of salt if you want. Alright, confidence during game. Alright, so this is something that's a bit more high level, so not necessarily in the beginning, but as you get more and more advanced in your progress of being a competitive 4K player, if you can kind of exude an air of confidence, or react in a way which your opponent's not necessarily expecting, it puts a little bit of doubt in their mind. And what do I mean by that? If your opponent's just smashed the crap out of a whole bunch of dudes, for example, when I was playing Tyranids and I've got like 1,000,001 termagants, I almost cheer when my opponent is killing them. And it makes it a bit fun for me and my opponent, but also my opponent's kind of a little bit weirded out. It's like, I'm killing your army and you're cheering it on. Are you trying to trick me? You know, like, it's a little bit of a mind game. And that's why I said this is a bit more advanced. It's just, your opponents, you know, and you can do it on purpose, or you can do it as just, you know, as a fun thing. But you can kind of cheer when they're killing things, especially if you don't care about it. Like, you know, if you put a bait unit and they go and say, yeah, go for it, go get him, yeah, oh yes, and he makes that charge, if you know that he didn't really want to make a charge, because it pulls him out of position, then you can capitalize on it. You know, you make the game fun, but you also kind of are doing things, you're cheering him on because it's actually hurting him. And again, you know, there's a fine line between being a jerk and not, but you can do some of these fun things, and even maybe it is the right thing. Again, it's almost like I've got 4 kids, so it's like, you know, it's like, I want you to wash the dishes, or, you know, clean your room. Sorry, I don't want you to clean your room. Maybe he does want me to clean my room. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. So it's just like, you don't want to charge him when you actually want him to charge. Or conversely, it's like, yeah, go get him. Come on, get him. And he'll second guess himself. Like, maybe I won't charge you. Why would? Oh, yeah. You get the idea. Just little things that you can do, keeping the game fun, but possibly influencing your opponent's decisions one way or the other. I like going through each phase, or even the pretend phase, like a mantra. So way back in my youth, I used to play Magic the Gathering, and kind of 6th and 7th edition of 40k, I used to call it the upkeep phase, where it was the kind of the before your turn phase where things would happen. And so I kind of went through, right, upkeep, movement, psychic, etc., etc. You know, I'll just go through it. So every turn I go through the phases. I go movement phase, and I might be playing Dark Elder with nothing, no psychics or anything like that. I just say out loud, psychic phase, nothing. Moving on. And I've seen Tau players, so some of the people that I play with and I've trained up, they play Tau, and they go movement. Alright, nothing's really moving, or, you know, a few things move. Psychic, nothing. Shooting, alright, here's where I'm going to spend half an hour. And then they say, melee, or charge, nothing. Fight phase, nothing. Morale, and just say out loud, pretty much, or just in your head, go through the phases, making sure you haven't forgotten anything. I know I've kicked myself a number of times, and even at the top level, under stress, you can see the video of the ETC. I forgot against Nick Rose, so against USA, I forgot to do a whole charge with one of my units. It wasn't a dramatic thing. You know, he fell a 3-inch charge in return, so it was a bit fair. But as you're going through these things, there are instances where you can forget, and that's what this kind of part of the game. You're just trying not to screw up. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the decisions have already been made. This is just about not screwing up. Okay. Keep an eye on the mission, and just keep reminding yourself over and over again, what is it I'm trying to win? You know, if you're drawing cards through Maelstrom, what's my cards again? What am I doing? I'm trying to achieve. All right, cool. The ITC stuff, easy enough. Am I holding one? Am I killing one? Am I holding more? Am I killing more? What's the bonus, etc. Just keep that in your mind, because nothing sucks more than moving a model off an objective and you're not holding any objectives, or you're holding one and your opponent's holding 2, and you have the bottom of turn. If you're going second, and if your opponent only has 1 objective and you have 2, and then you move one of your models off for no reason other than just because it was getting a little bit better position or something like that, and now you lose an entire point, that sucks more than pretty much anything you can do in the game. It's always remember what the mission is. And lastly, and I mentioned this before, but it's really transparent dice rolling. So roll the dice in a place where your opponent can see. If any dice go kind of behind the building, whatever, kind of slide your hand like this, trying not to nudge it. Make sure you put your hands out. So what I like doing is when I roll dice, I roll them, and then I pick out all the garbage ones, and then I go like this, like almost like a blackjack deal, or so like a person in the casino. I go like this, and I'll wait like a second or two, just so that they can see that there's no more dice that I should be picking up. There was some issues in some of the tournaments I played at, most recently the ETC one, where my opponent would be really quickly grabbing the dice and then scooping them up, and I would say, hey man, you missed a dice or two, but he scooped them up, so who's going to argue? It got so bad that we had me and two other bystanders, one of his teammates, as well as one of those bystanders, actually saying, no, yeah, you picked up a 3, and it was just getting very heated. And this is the tilting bit. It's all about not screwing up here. And when that type of thing happens, it tilts people. Both tilts your opponent, but also tilts you. If you see your opponent purposely picking up dice that he should be, you start getting really angry. And when you get angry, you can't think anymore. And you start making mistakes. In that same game, this was one of the worst games, in essence, I played in the last 12 months, where he was doing things, I was becoming tilted, I started getting angry or upset, and then I started forgetting things. And you see the cycle just, and you have to come up with ways of trying to calm down, trying to relax, and we'll talk about this in the next portion of it, which is after the game. But just deep breathing, standing up for yourself, calling things out, and just understand that everyone's human, no one is perfect. Alright, so next phase is after the game. So by the end of the game, you should have a pretty good idea about if you've won or lost. Honestly, you should be keeping track of the scores. ITC makes this very easy to do. ETC, it's a little bit more hard, but you should be able to kind of get a general gist about, have I lost this game or not? And if you're playing in a team event, your captain or the coach will come along saying, how's everything going? And you should have a good idea about what's going on. The main thing after a game is making sure you've scored properly for both yourself and your team, if you're playing in a team event. So scoring everything properly, packing everything up, decompressing, and resetting. So if you're upset, getting over it and moving on. It's a little bit robotic, a little bit mechanical, but it's just trying to reset and get your head right for the next game, because you've got to do this. You've got to do this game. So scoring, don't miss anything. Do it methodically. Hopefully, if it's ITC, you've done it at the end of each turn. You're now just adding it up. It should take you another 30 seconds. There shouldn't be any arguments about scores or anything like that. And honestly, it's about just making sure you've entered into things properly. Make sure, if you're doing it, make sure you show your opponents that they're happy, and vice versa. Make sure you check that your opponents filled it out properly. Be a pleasant winner or loser if you've lost. Honestly, there's no point in, if the game went well and you lost, learn from it. Whinging about it, being angry or anything like that, assuming nothing untoward happened, it's not beneficial for you. Like, you might feel it's like a cathartic thing to just whinge, but it doesn't help you become a better player. Conversely, winning, same thing. You can celebrate or be happy about yourself. I'm never going to take that away from anybody, but there's no point in being a jerk about it. Also, it's a good opportunity. Even if I win or lose, I ask my opponent, doesn't matter what skill level, was there something that you noticed that I could have done better? I always ask that, depending on how the game went. If the game was a whitewash, I don't want to feel like I've rubbed my opponent's nose into it or anything like that, and so I'd be a bit tactful, but I almost always ask my opponent if they noticed anything in particular that I did silly or anything like that, because I like other people noticing that I've done something wrong, because that's how I learn. Pack up, rest and drink. This is something I recommend every single person I've seen. Even when I'm captain of a team, I just tell my people, don't just leave your crap everywhere. You know, like people leave dice and models and everything. Don't do that. Pack up. You don't want to come back and have all your stuff still out, and then you have to pack up and you just get yourself upset again. You want to pack up everything, go away, come back, calm yourself, you know, get a drink of water, whatever, reset, come back, and then you're fresh. You grab your box or your tray or whatever, go to a new table, and it's a new game. Try and put in any issues or any annoyances or whatever that you had from the previous game. It's out of your mind and you're resetting. Okay? Doing this as kind of like a reset mechanism also helps with any propensity to get on tilt. So if you are finding yourself kind of getting more and more upset and you're making mistakes or whatever, you don't want to, I call it like a spiral of just you're spiraling down in essence, where you make a mistake in one game, you bring it then to another game where you're still angry, you're still upset, and you make another mistake, and eventually you kind of give up. In your head, you've given up, you're not paying attention, and you lose pretty much every game from there on, barring a miracle. And you really, really want to not do that, both in a team event, but also in your own event. You're trying to compartmentalize each game as much as possible. And I think I'm reasonably good at doing this. And these are some of the little techniques I do. So, the example, CanCon 2018. So, CanCon 2018. CanCon is the biggest tournament in Australia, or biggest ITC tournament at least. And the very first game, some issues, but I lost the very first game. I compartmentalized it. I had the TO over, all that type of stuff. Forgetting about that, I just said, right, I'm gonna box that up. That was that game. I'm now going to win the next 7 games, and that's exactly what happened. I still think about and talk about that game on the day and during the tournament. I can kind of stopgap's the word I'm thinking of. Stopgap any of those bad feelings or any issues or whatever you want to describe it as, and just say, that was that game, I'm starting a new game, and packing up, resetting, getting a drink of water, going to the bathroom, whatever you need to do, things that you can do to get that mindset shift, to get that reset that you need. And another thing for the bigger tournaments is really just pace yourself. So being tired, having a headache, getting drunk, and if you're drinking too much during the day or afterwards for like the next day, these are all things that are going to affect you and your kind of performance during a game and during an event. So just try and limit them, and if there's seats available, try to sit down a couple of times. I know most gamers are standing, and because you want to be paying attention, you want to be attentive, and usually when you sit, you kind of sit leaning back and resting. What I try to do is, if there is a seat available, I will sit maybe once or twice during a 2.5 hour game for about 2 to 3 minutes. And just kind of stretch out my back, because when you're kind of bent over. So what I'll do is I'll sit down and then I'll stretch back, and I'll just try and get my body like, right, come on. This is like a water break at a marathon or something like that. That's pretty much it. So during the game, as I said before, during the game, it's just all about not screwing up, not doing something that's going to annoy you, annoy your opponent, not making silly mistakes in the game, etc., etc. There are, of course, tactics that you can do during the game that you should pay attention to. Lots of resources online about that. But really I'm focusing about keeping your mind available and having the time to think. Okay, that's what this course is all about. Alrighty, so we're up to the last phase of an event, which is after the event, of course. And this is a good time for reflection. I do like after event because I get to think about kind of how did I go, and if I won anything, celebrate that fact. If I didn't, that's okay. Give high fives to whoever did. Think about how my army went in the event. What were the kind of weaknesses I noticed? What was the feedback I was getting? What were my results? That type of stuff. So it's just reflecting after a number of games on how you did. Sometimes I make wholesale changes after an event. Other times I run, as what happened about in the last 6 months, I ran the same army for 3 tournaments in a row, one weekend after another. And after the weekend, I had a really, really good idea about, what the army could do, what the weaknesses were, and then I could make a really informed decision about what the changes needed to be. After event is also where you get that incremental improvement. So you can improve during the event, but usually you're very focused on all the other type of stuff. It's after the event where you're kind of reflecting on what happened, and then you're starting that whole process again of before the next event, and doing the reading, rather than analysis and all that type of stuff. But this is you're really focusing on yourself, how you went, how what your brain was doing in a sense, how your body was feeling, how your army went, how the rest of how everyone kind of reacted to you as well. This is an important thing because your reputation is an important thing. So if you versed 5 people and 4 of them were very unpleasant games, it may be you. If you only had 1, and let's say you don't think you did anything particularly wrong, then it's okay. Maybe it's an anomaly. But if there's multiple games and lots of complaints and all that, maybe it's just you, and you really need to reflect on that. So there's lots of things to reflect on after an event. As I said, if you did well, celebrate that fact. Being Australian, and in Australia we have a thing called tall poppy syndrome, which is anyone who's too far, the head or a tall poppy, anything that's above kind of the rest of the pack, they kind of get cut down. It's not like in America, someone who's doing well is usually celebrated. In Australia, not as much. It's not necessarily the best thing, but it is something that I think it's important for all people to celebrate when they do well. When you review an event, how you went and the army, I like focusing on my gut. Okay, so when I'm kind of looking at each unit, I will know when, I'll kind of like think through, and just when my gut says like, did this unit pull its weight? What was I using it in the way I was envisaging it to be used? And if I was using it how I thought it should be used, and it still wasn't doing what it was, my gut kind of says like, there's something wrong there. Conversely, like if I use something and I thought it was going to do X, Y, and Z, and it does something completely different, and it does it really, really well, I then say, ooh, maybe there's something really, really awesome here. It's like maybe there's a whole list idea that I hadn't considered, in this world. Anyway, I like listening to my gut when I kind of do the review. I don't necessarily come up with answers. This is another key thing, and this is I'm a designer professionally, and just trying to focus on how to solve problems is not the right way. It's what is the issue, and just identifying issues and identifying weaknesses and things like that is almost more important than just trying to come up with a whole bunch of different solutions. So, because if you haven't identified exactly where the weaknesses in your list are, and where maybe some really strong bits are, then all you're trying to do is just, you're kind of say, like, there's a hole in my boat. There's also like 14 other holes, but you're just trying to fix up this one hole with X, Y, and Z. Maybe you need a different boat or something else. And it's a bad analogy, but you get the idea. Don't go into solution mode straight away. It's do a full review of the event, of yourself, etc., etc. Maybe you were just really, really tired near the end and you lost 2 games because you were tired, not because the army was terrible. Something like that. Like these are just ideas about the types of reviews you would be doing at the end of your event to be really true to yourself. And lastly, really, it's just get back into practicing. Just practice. Being flexible and adaptable in all types of situations, in the armies you take and things like that. That's one of the more or most important things of being a top gamer. The more flexible you can be, the more adaptable you can be to certain situations, to really bad dice rolls or whatever, they're more of an indicator of a successful gamer than anything else. So that brings us to the conclusion of the course. So if we were doing this face-to-face and one-on-ones, this is where we would be picking one of the activities that we did. So you had a whole bunch of activities that we went over during this course. We'd be picking one of those and then doing a bunch more, or we'd be spending a bunch more time on those particular ones. So for example, if you really enjoyed or found valuable the objective placement, we'd do a whole bunch more on that. So the activities, I'll just list through the activities that we went over, and I recommend you practicing this on your own. Again, looking online, seeing if there's other examples of articles or videos or whatever discussing these particular topics, and practicing. The more practice you put into this stuff, it can only help. So we've got list building, looking at lists, trying to understand what it does, how it plays, and what it means for us. Setting up a chess clock, getting a chess clock, setting it up, using one, picking sides and terrain, identifying terrain and things like that. Once you've got your sides, once you understand what the terrain's doing, working out what your opponent's going to be looking to do and how they're looking to win in that particular mission. Conversely, similarly to how you're also going to look to win. And then what that means for objective placements, and then actually placing the objectives. From that, deployment, always considering how it's like linking these pieces together. My opponent wants to do this, I want to do this, this means X, Y, and Z. The table though has no terrain or lots of terrain. The objectives is now like this, so that means the game's going to be kind of like this, right? So by now you should have an idea of the outline of the story. If the game was a story, and these are all different chapters, you've kind of got the outline. So if you know what the outline of the story is, can you deploy to help or hinder that story? And once you've done your deployment, does going first or going second enhance that? It's never going to decide it unless you're playing just gunline on gunline and you haven't put too much thought into this, but generally, if you want to go second and you've deployed for going second, and where the objectives are and your strategy to go second has helped, then you going second is just helping that. It's not deciding the game or That's about it. And then there's a whole bunch during the game. There's a whole bunch of tactics surrounding models in combat, so they can't fall back, so they can't be shot, etc. There's lots and lots of intricacies during a game that you can practice as well. But that's what practice is all about. So yes, overall, bunch of activities. I recommend doing some more reading, doing some more practice, and hopefully this training has been really, my aim for all this was for this training to be as valuable as it can be to make 40k gamers more competitive around the world. And really that's it. The more competitive it gets, the more almost mainstream it gets, the more enjoyable it gets for players, but also observers. I don't know where 40k is going to be in the future, but the skill level, once it increases, is only going to help the hobby as a whole. So I want to thank you very much for taking this training. It's been my pleasure to be able to impart some of my knowledge and experiences to you, and I hope you found it valuable. I'd be very much appreciated, or appreciative, sorry, for any feedback that you've got. I've feedback in the comments below, feedback on my Facebook page, on Godhammer Gaming, on pretty much anywhere. Like any type of feedback, just send me PMs, send me an email, whatever you want to do. How I can make this more relevant for other people, what topics I could cover in the future, anything you want. I'm more than happy to take on board any constructive criticism or feedback. Yeah, so thank you very much, and as I said in the beginning, my name is Gojkovic, and good gaming.